Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the redo of the next update of the French presidential election series. Some of the more keen viewers of the channel, I believe there's 5 of you, would have seen that I posted this originally on Sunday, but my mic was broken, so no audio got recorded, and I generally do these in one take and do not actually really check to see, so I did not double check this, so I posted a video that had no audio. Considering the format of my channel, that's not a very good video. So in that regard, I am redoing it. As I said, it's one take and not scripted, so we will see. This won't be the same video, but it's going to be similar. Not that anyone knew what the last video was. It basically doesn't exist because no audio was recorded. Needless to say, where are we at for France? So, first things first. I really think that this update is basically a dead update. I think the results right now are extremely anomalous and probably have almost zero bearing on the actual status of the French election. Specifically, the polls in the last week, since basically Monday, the 28th of February, Macron has surged in the polls. Le Pen and Zemmour, Zemmour has crashed. Le Pen maybe stayed the same, maybe lost a little. It's kind of hard to say. And Pécresse maybe stayed the same, maybe lost a little. Again, hard to say because it's such a minute difference. All of this is almost entirely a result of the Ukraine war. Now, I don't actually believe by April 10th, on the first round of voting, the Ukraine war is going to particularly dominate people's concerns on election day. I don't think Macron's gains here are tangible. They're significant. He went from 24 to 30 in polling. I do not think they are real gains. I think they are temporary surges in support because people are freaked out by the war in Ukraine and are backing the more pro-NATO candidate, which is Macron. And obviously, people like Zemmour and Le Pen, who are very vocally anti-NATO, have lost a bit of support. That is all perfectly rational and makes sense, but I do not believe it will persist because, importantly, foreign policy issues don't stay in people's minds for long. Unlike basic economic issues or basic social issues that affect you every single day, a foreign policy issue only affects somebody until the point that they get completely media fatigued by that thing and they stop paying attention to it. Will that how long is that period of time? Again, it's hard to say. I would not say there's a hard number to it, but I'm inclined to believe that the remaining 5 weeks of the election, 4 or 5, I don't recall the exact number, are sufficiently long that it won't be the dominating issue, especially since the ramifications of a lot of decisions Western countries have made are starting to have their effects. And they could very easily and very quickly completely and utterly drown out any anti-Russian sentiment that has emerged, and possibly cause actual, real, tangible harm. Is this real? Is this certain? No. But what things have already started to happen is oil prices globally are skyrocketing. I believe we're at close to $125 a barrel today. Food prices, particularly in grains like wheat, are going up quite significantly because Ukraine and Russia are both major wheat exporters. Now, mind you, these are futures, not current prices, so it's not strictly correlated. It is correlated, but like it's not 1 to 1. So 68% on a wheat future is not necessarily 68% on the current present day price of wheat because it is a future, obviously, not current wheat prices. But both of those things are portents of bad. Is it markets overreacting? We don't know yet. But if it persists for any length of time, I believe those two things would completely drown out everything else in the election. I think maybe Zemmour's and Le Pen's main issues of immigration and Islam in France and the role of it in France are probably going to stay no matter how bleak it gets economically. But foreign policy concerns will get completely drowned out if people basically cannot afford to pay for gas to fill their cars, fuel to heat their homes, and food to fill their bellies. We will see how that goes forward. If it does turn into this, I expect Macron to just objectively lose the election if that starts becoming a major issue. Sorry, it's a major issue now if that persists as a major issue on election day. If it subsides because the markets correct themselves, perhaps, though it's doubtful the markets will correct themselves for things like oil because it seems like no one, at least in the short term, wants to buy Russian oil, even countries who are not with Western sanctions, which would actually mean effectively global oil production has contracted significantly if Russian oil production is not being sold. Now, I will not get into whether this is the right or wrong response, what I think of the Ukraine war, because that's not relevant directly. Just these effects of it are relevant to the French election. If people would like me to discuss my 2 cents on the Ukraine war, I mean, feel free to comment below. I could do a video on that. I don't know how much intelligent comments I do have to say, but I do have opinions on it. But that is for a different video if people want it. Otherwise, I will ignore that subject because it's not related to elections directly. The point of this whole opening spiel here is Macron's surge in the polls. I don't think it's strong support. I think it is a temporary knee-jerk reaction, and he's probably going to decay back down to 24-25 for first round. And second round, he hasn't really surged that much. Like Le Pen dropped 2 or 3 points, and Zemmour 2 or 3 points, which is significant, but not as significant as Macron surging 6 points in the first round. So I think both will subside. Now, ignoring that particular shock to the polling, the other big deal with the French election right now is Christiane Taubira has officially dropped out as of Friday, or I think it was last Tuesday, technically. At that point, she dropped out. She really should have probably dropped out well before. I believe she only ended up finishing with like 100 or so sponsorships. Now, the legitimacy of requiring elected officials to endorse a candidate to get them on a ballot is open for debate, and I personally don't particularly like it, but that is the French system. It is what it is, and she did not make it the threshold, and really, by the time she dropped out, she had no hope for a while of making that threshold, especially since Parti Socialiste was doing its best to get its local members to not sponsor her, to not further split left-wing vote, which frankly does make sense tactically. So her votes, if we look here, she had about 2.78% last week, February 27th, and those votes will be distributed probably among the rest of the voting. Likely, mostly these candidates, well, ignoring Tabira, but Macron, Jadot, Hidalgo, Mélenchon, and Roussel will probably be the ones who majorly get her votes. I will note she has dropped out, but because of how I calculate the second round vote intentions, I cannot zero her immediately. It would mess up the math. But this will asymptotically approach zero by election day if every single poll she has a zero, which she will, because she's no longer running. Similarly, Roussel is still being under-modeled in my poll because there are like 8 weeks of polls where he technically was polled in the poll, but I didn't record it because I didn't think he was going to go anywhere. Then he surged quite a bit in January, February, and then I was like, oh crap, I should add him in. So he's going to asymptotically approach roughly 4-ish, maybe 5-ish%, which isn't particularly good, but if you compare it to Hidalgo or Jadot, it's about on par. Other things worth noting, Melancon from his low on February 6th has basically surged a little over 1 percentage point and is continuing to go up. I don't think in the current climate in France with war in war between Russia and Ukraine and Islam and immigration and crime and the economy all being major considerations, I don't think he's going to reach his 2017 levels. His issues just really aren't being discussed particularly heavily. He has the potential of rallying much of the left and could pose a challenge if, and theoretically could even sneak into the second round if Le Pen, Zemmour, and Pécresse split their votes a bit harder than they currently are. And he rallies, say, the Taubira and Roussel support. And I will note with Roussel, his numbers are lower than they should be, but it's not because these people are higher, it's because they're in the other camp. So other is overpolled right now by probably 1.5 percentage points. So I don't think it's a very big issue. It shouldn't actually affect any of the math at all at any point up until now, or, well, period. So I'm basically just breaking out of the other column, but I have to do it slowly because I don't really have the time to go dig through 8 weeks of polls and add him. That is a lot of data entries that I don't really have the time to do. And frankly, I think it should be fine by election day, and that's really all that matters. Everything up until election day, all these updates are more for a snapshot of how the elections are going, how candidates are going, and as long as I emphasize that Roussel's probably underrepresented right now, it's fine, because all that matters is on the last update I do before the election, he's spot on. So if I know he's off for a particular reason that I think is going to resolve itself, it's fine, in my opinion. Now, back to this map. So, obviously, since Macron is surging, he's gained a lot of ground basically everywhere. A lot of the battleground departments in southern France and central east France. I think there's a French Comté Burgundy, I believe that's the region, have shifted towards him, and Grand's east as well, and Normandy. Again, I don't really put much stock in this. I don't think this is a long-term gain, and well, we'll see going forward, but I'm doubtful that it's going to be long-term, especially with all the other economic issues starting to hit the fan. Moving on to second rounds, though, this week, because of how I'm doing second round polling, I am technically tracking Pécresse, but I'm not doing a forecast for her because she did not score second place in a poll last week, and that is the criteria. The week before the video was released, they had to score second place or tied for second place to get a second round prediction. Hypothetically, if someone was tied for first, that would also qualify, but I doubt it in this climate that someone will be tied for first. So we start off with Zamor here. So if you thought the last Zamor map was bad, well, this one's even worse. He lost about 0.7 percentage points, which is very significant. But again, I don't really think it's real losses, and I could go over where he's lost stuff, but basically it's everywhere. A lot of these ridings, or sorry, not ridings, departments, you can't even see the difference because, as you can see here, Paris, it's maxed at greater than 59%. Paris, I believe, in this poll, sorry, this update measured 71% support. The central district of Paris measured 71% support for Zemmour, or sorry, Macron versus Zemmour, so it's quite high. A lot of the departments in Brittany are also quite high. So this is broken the model. It doesn't. I guess I could add more colors, but I really don't think it matters. At a certain point, it's like you're carrying by over 60%. You're just dominating. No one really cares how much more dominating you are. Though the one interesting thing I will note, apparently he's doing better in Mayotte. He's done worse in every other department, but he's better in Mayotte. Fluke of the model, fluke of statistics, real gains, I don't know. But there you go. Using more fans, he's doing better in Mayotte. He's still losing, but he's doing better. Moving on to Le Pen here. Now, Le Pen has basically the same story. She's doing worse across the board. For previously stated reasons, I don't really put much faith that they are actually real losses and not just a temporary setback because of foreign policy stuff that I don't think is going to be relevant on voting day. We will see going forward. Not too much to say, basically. Macron got stronger in almost every single department. I think there might be one or two where he did worse, but essentially every single department he did better. That's what you would expect, though, when he gained about almost an entire percentage point, because Le Pen lost 0.5 and he gained 0.5. So, an entire percentage point swing. Though I will note, in regards to Le Pen, that yes, she did lose 0.5 in a week. But her March 6th adjusted data is still better than her 30th of January adjusted data. Now, that said, as of today, her niece has endorsed Zemmour openly and is, I believe, campaigning for him now. So we don't really know where that's going to go yet, but I strongly suspect, if we go back to this view, I guess, there's not really a good view for this. Oh well. I strongly suspect that her number, here of 18.08, is probably going to go down, and Zemmour will probably recover a lot of his ground, because I think a lot of... There seems to be her niece, Marcelle Le Pen, I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong, apologies, is quite well liked from what I can tell from the French right wing. So her endorsement for Zemmour is also quite a big endorsement. He's racking up all the big names, apparently. Will this propel him to second round? I don't know. We don't have any polling for this yet, but it is a development that I thought was worth adding here. There seems to be a lot of defections from the Le Pen camp to Zemmour, and from the Pécresse camp to Zemmour. So I think, particularly, Zemmour's polling numbers are likely to be underestimated. Unfortunately, since he's not run before, and he's running with a party that's never run before, and he's running on a platform that doesn't really have a party that it correlates strongly to in previous elections, I don't know how to forecast that. But I'm expecting a lot of polling error for Zemmour. It's campaigns like his, with messages like his, with policy goals like his, typically get way more support than people are willing to publicly say, because there's a lot of social pressure to, especially, maybe not so much in France. I don't want to speak verbatim on France social pressure, but in the West, or sorry, in Canada or US, there'd be a lot of social pressure to not publicly condemn things like Islam or not publicly w- demand fewer or no immigration, and especially you would be destroyed in the media if you wanted to basically end asylum, refugee statuses, essentially. But all of those things are actually much more popular than people are willing to admit, and even people who don't principally like them, i.e., they don't want, they publicly don't like them, often understand why. So I suspect, because of that, he's probably extremely underpolled. This is not a great comparison, because he's nothing like Donald Trump personally in how he acts or how he behaves or how he speaks, but politically, he's very similar to Trump, and Trump also had a major underpolling effect. Extremely so. The only question I have with this, and I unfortunately cannot model it, is how significant will this be? Will it be enough for him to win, or will it just not be relevant at all? I don't know, but I suspect he is extremely underpolled. And extremely could be 2 or 3 percentage points, which, again, might not even be enough to put him in the second round, but if you're talking about someone with 14.33% of the first round vote, if they're off by 3 percentage points, that's significant, and that could actually, in this case. And it's likely, if that is the case, that it's not Le Pen voters per se. It's likely mostly like Pécresse voters, but we will see. But this is my early prediction. I think Zamora is going to outperform polling on election day. Though I will also put a caveat: the other option, which I think is less likely, is he could wildly underperform. Historically, Le Pen has underperformed her polling, but I don't think that's because people don't like her ideas per se. I think it's because her supporters are mostly blue collar and young, and those people don't vote very high or don't have a very high vote intensity rate. So they answer the poll, but then they don't go to the ballot box. Which, even, I don't care what party you support, go to the ballot boxes, please. Do so. Voting is good, in theory, but not voting is not good. There's no circumstance where not voting when you can vote makes sense to me. Even if you don't think your vote will matter, it still makes more sense to vote than not vote because it could matter. And in the case of some, let's say you are a Hidalgo supporter, there's almost no hope that Hidalgo will make it to the second round. But by going out and voting, you signal that you support Hidalgo's policies, that you like the way she ran her campaign, that you like her positions, and especially in the case of France, it might actually impact the third round, the unofficial third round, which is the parliamentary elections, or the legislative elections. It could affect that significantly if a candidate does better in the presidential vote. But in other countries where this is not the case, it still lets that candidate know that you support them and lets other people know you support them. Because a lot of the time, and this is where I don't like polling, polling is used by people who don't understand polling, not to their own fault, but this is how the media pushes it, that, oh, Hidalgo has no chance of winning, so you shouldn't vote for her because your vote will be wasted. No, if you like her policies, you should still vote for her. If you like Zamora's policies, you should still vote for him. Now, maybe if you are really into tactical voting and you really want to narrow it down, maybe you can think about that, but do not look at polling or look at numbers and be like, oh, my candidate's not doing very good, I'm not going to vote. Don't do that. voting for someone who has no hope of winning still matters. So do vote. Now, one last thing here before I wrap this up. So I'm tracking second round abstention data here. Now, the important thing to note with this number doesn't mean 89% of French people will vote in the second round. No, what this means is 89% of people who vote in the first round will vote in the second round if it's Macron versus Le Pen. Or about 83% if it's Macron versus Pécresse. Or about 85% if it's Macron versus Zemmour. It's a very important distinction. I have no idea what the turnout will be in the first round. There are some polls that do it, but I don't know. There's not enough of them to make a proper aggregate, and the few companies that do post it, I'm not 100% certain how much I want to trust a single or two companies for such an important piece of data. I might add something about that in the next couple of weeks, but for now I don't have that. But for second round, I do have an abstention data. So, what does this mean? Well, you look at Macron versus Le Pen, about 75% of Hidalgo supporters plan on voting in a second round, 81% of Jadot, 96-ish% of Macron, all of the Le Pen supporters, 95-ish% of Zemmour, etc. Again, Roussel is underrepresented in Macron versus Le Pen and Macron versus Pécresse. So be warned with this. And Taubira, again, is going to approach 0. Which means that this number is still going to be accurate even though this is going down. Because this should go down at roughly the same rate. This goes down, so it should balance out, and this number should not be affected by her dropping out. The math should work out. What we can get from this, though, is why it looks like, for example, Pécresse is underpolled quite heavily for second round data, and it's like blatantly, obviously so underpolling. I don't really even know how they managed to underpoll it so much, but essentially, when you plug in the numbers of first round vote intention multiplied by turnout of candidates, so for example, Mélenchon, about 37% plan on voting for Macron, and about 30% plan on voting for Pécresse according to polling, which is strange in my mind, but apparently that's what it is. Well, when you plug that in, you get much higher than what the polls actually say she's doing in the second round, which is why here she has about 47%, when I think she's getting currently polled around 40. I don't understand how they're even getting those numbers. I just straight up don't. I even plug in their own data, their own reported data, plugged in, doesn't get their own number. I don't understand. But whatever. She's not likely. It doesn't look like she's even going to get second round. So that's unrelated tangent. But this is why Pécresse actually does better than Le Pen in a head-to-head. It's not necessarily because Pécresse is more popular. It's because fewer people are planning on voting. And you might be like, oh, 83 to 89, it's only 6%. I mean, that's a couple million voters. I believe 35 million voted in the in the first round of 2017. So 6% of 35 million people is 2.1 million people. So that's quite a lot of people not going to vote, particularly more so among left-wing voters. Though Le Pen and Zemmour also going down. One other question I have out for people. This is something that is reported in the polls, and I flat out don't really believe it. I plugged it in because that's what the polls are saying, and I have no reason, no method to try to correct this because I don't know how to correct this because there hasn't been a situation like this before. Really, a center-right versus slightly more right-wing candidate in France, but apparently 23% of Le Pen voters plan on voting for Macron versus 51% plan on voting for Pécresse, and the rest not planning on voting for second round. It seems unlikely to me. I can't really imagine why a Le Pen voter would plan on voting and vote for Macron in a second round head-to-head. I could see them not voting, but I don't really understand the Macron. So if you are a Le Pen voter, or equally a Zemmour voter, because the same trend with a shockingly high preference to Macron, I mean, it's still the majority still prefer Pécresse over Macron, but it's the 22% is a lot higher than I would expect based on Zemmour and Le Pen's rhetoric versus Macron's rhetoric. So if you are a Le Pen or Zemmour supporter and you would rather vote Macron over Pécresse, please let me know in the comments why. I'm sure you have a perfectly valid reason. I just can't think about it. Now, to wrap this all up, we have, well, Macron versus Zemmour. Kind of splits the difference between Macron versus Pécresse and Macron versus Le Pen. Surprising. Nothing really surprises me. Other than the fact that Zemmour voters apparently don't plan on voting 100%, even though Pécresse and Le Pen voters plan on voting 100%, which is amusing. But that's probably just a quirk of math, not like a real math, not like real data. But that's where we are. France update kind of worthless because I think the Ukraine war has completely spoiled the entire last week of polling and might also spoil this entire week of polling. So I think it's really going to skew everything. We'll see. But I don't think this is going to look like the map on election day. I think it's going to be a lot closer than this. We'll see going forward. But, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. Do all those YouTube things. Comment below any thoughts you have on the election. Think my analysis is correct. You think the Ukraine issue will actually still be a meaningful issue come April 10th? I don't know. I love the comments. I always enjoy reading them. So, please do provide them. Otherwise, I hope you all have a good day, and hopefully next week I don't break my microphone.